in beyond what we have had here in the Berkeley campus, because we work as hard as we can to retain as many jobs as possible. But some layoffs are inevitable because the money literally doesn't exist to pay people's salaries. And the layoffs, by the way, have gone from the associate vice chancellor level, from the top all the way down, and have been relatively uniformly distributed. Let's see, the next one was the under 40,000. My own instinct was not to have any cuts for people under 40,000, but that there was a system-wide. So that was our local recommendation, but system-wide furlough system that was set up ended up with 4% for the lowest paid workers. And when Chancellor Breslauer and I challenged that, we got basically told that the system as a whole, when they basically calculated how much money would be saved, it was concluded system-wide that unless there was 4% at the bottom, that not enough revenue would be generated to save the number of jobs that we needed to save to minimize the number of layoffs. Let's keep going to the next one.
Full disclosure of the budget.
I'm strongly in favor of full disclosure of the budget.
Defend do not privatize public education in California.
As I already spoke to that, we're moving as hard as we can.
And elect the regents by students, faculty, and staff.
I'm neutral on that. I would like to see a more democratic process, and I've personally been pushing. One of my unhappinesses with the regents is that there's not a single academic. So there's not anybody with academic experience. So I've personally nominated a couple of people who I think would be, are experienced academics who are very forceful, and I know would be outstanding members of the Regents and would represent our values very well, but I've not been successful in that.
Thank you.
I apologize if I don't exactly understand the UC process and California politics like all the other people. My question, I think, is really obvious, and I feel almost kind of stupid that it hasn't been brought up before. My question is this: you say that the government has not been funding the university fully for a while now, so that proves that you are clearly trying to take advantage of a disoriented and confused economic situation to push these widely unpopular measures. If we need these crazy nebulous fee increases now, why don't we at least make the increases temporary and vote on them later when we're not this confused and we're not all going crazy and we understand how they've affected us?
As you said, that we've seen progressive cuts over time, but because they've come slowly, we've been able to adjust in a systematic way. And we thought in January, with the cuts that were coming in January, that we also could manage them in a well-controlled way. But then suddenly we had an additional $80 million disappear from our budget, and that has to be responded to. Unfortunately, this isn't a choice. When the money isn't there, the money isn't there. I hope that indeed, following what you said, that we see that we come back to some kind of an equilibrium and that we can make some corrections to what's happened. Rehire people, start hiring more faculty, follow my proposal, which was to ramp up the size of the set-aside to increase the amount of financial aid that we have available. So a whole bunch of things that we would like to follow in the long term to ameliorate the situation. But in the short term, we have this sudden change and we have to respond, but we don't have any choice.
I'm sorry, I just want to respond to that. I mean, my answer is that there's a difference between wanting to go back to an equilibrium and requiring that we go back to equilibrium before we can come back to these crazy fee increases. I mean, we should be able to have a chance to at least redecide without having them be permanent, to redecide whether we should keep them, because we know that there's a lot of these fee increases that we don't know about now, and we don't know exactly how they affect us now.
I think if I take a different aspect of this, and that is the increase of enrollment of non-California residents in the undergraduate student body, which is part of the financial model for climbing out of the hole that we have been forced into. If the state were to not just stop its divestment, but reverse its divestment in higher education, I could very well imagine that we would go back to closer to a 90% California resident model rather than the 80% that we may be drifting toward now. due to financial exigency. So that might be, you know, an explicit bargain we can make with the state if we got to that stage of bargaining with legislators about this, that when they restore 60 or 70 million dollars worth of cuts, we can then go back to a 90-10 model. That hypothetically that would be possible, but it really depends on what the state does. You know, it would be nice to have no fee increases, no layoffs, no pay cuts, and all of that. But then, okay, then the question becomes, how are you going to cut $147 million?
I just wanted to finally respond, and you guys don't have to respond to this, but it's just my belief that even if California starts making more money and they're able to fund the education more, I don't believe that if we've raised our tuition now that we will go back and decrease it as an extra measure. I think that we need to force us to decrease it before we can increase it back to what
you may be right about the politics of that. I could well imagine, however, that what we could end up doing is when funds start to get restored, and they're not going to be restored either quickly or in their entirety, we could increase the percentage of the fees that get returned to financial aid, so that those that can least afford them or can less afford them, because the lower income students are covered, will be protected. You know, even at $10,000 for 1/3 of our student body that come from high-income families, that's an extraordinary bargain. And so if we can return more of that to aid, we can protect the middle class better. And that might be one thing one could do without necessarily reducing the absolute size of the fee.
Obviously, it has a huge effect on me, so it'll affect me for the next 4 years. And this is actually kind of, you guys already just talked about this, but I want to know your thoughts on, do you believe that if fee increases are passed by the regents, I understand you guys aren't regents, but I still want to hear your thoughts on, do you believe that a provision should be included in that, saying that when economic times are right, that the fees should be brought back down, that way that the fees aren't permanent, so we don't see a privatization here, so that when economic times are right, and when we can afford it again, we can bring the fees back down?
Two of us at least have no objection in principle.
Depends on what one means by when things are right. That one would have to be very specific, not just stopping disinvestment, but reversing state disinvestment.
Certainly my own view is that fees should not get any higher.
We are often told that the problem is Sacramento, the problem is the state. Okay, I agree to a certain extent, but the problem is also right here. So, we're also often told several times that this is a shared sacrifice. We're all going through this together. So if that's true, I really want an answer. Do you guys and other folks in the administration commit to giving yourselves poverty-level wages before you lay off any workers, before you cut any classes, before you cut any student services? And I really want an answer, why or why not? What does a shared sacrifice really mean in practice?
So for me, I would ask you, and what should that be?
Well, I was talking to one of the workers, and that the starting pay for custodians is $12.50.
Right. So this is what I think is really interesting, and I think it's kind of hypocritical. You all are in college to get education, to get degrees. And when you get them, you're not going to settle for a pay cut at pay at $12.50 an hour. You went to college so that you can get an education, that you will have a better paying job, so that you can excel in your life in this. And so to ask somebody else to do what you would not do is kind of interesting to me. So if you would also say to me that you would be willing to, after you've gone through and gotten a baccalaureate degree, and a master's degree, and a PhD, and accept a pay at $12.50 an hour, then we might be able to have a conversation. And I'm really serious about that. I mean, let me be very clear about this. I, but more than anyone else, understand issues of equity and inclusion, and issues of fair pay. So what is fair pay? We got people who are making very, very little bit of money. And being here at Berkeley, when I first